You stand over the kitchen sink, after a long day, the evening light fading slow outside the window. You ran the water just a moment ago to wash up the supper dishes, but instead of rushing down the pipe with that familiar, satisfying gurgle, it just sits there. A heavy gray pool of greasy water is creeping up toward the rim of the basin, carrying little specks of leftover food and a dull soap film. It is draining so slow you could watch the grass grow in the time it takes for a single inch to drop. And then comes that thought. It is the very same thought that catches most folks in a moment like this, the one that ends up costing them the most. You think to yourself, I had better put down the dish towel and call the plumber. You can already picture how that goes. The man comes out in his truck. He spends maybe 20 minutes under your sink with a heavy wrench, and then he hands you a slip of paper with a number written on it that would feed a family of 4 for a whole week. Or maybe, if you don't call the man, you walk down to the store and buy a heavy plastic jug filled with a harsh chemical poison, something that smells of warnings and burning, and you pour it down into the bones of your home, hoping for a miracle. Stop and think about that for a moment. Understand this. Why do we look outside our own walls the very second a small thing goes wrong? How did people live for generations across this land without a professional on speed dial or a shelf full of store-bought poisons? The truth of the matter is that 9 times out of 10, a slow or completely stopped kitchen drain is a thing you can clear yourself in a matter of minutes. You do not need a plumber, and you certainly do not need a jug of caustic acid. You need 2 things that are likely already sitting quiet in your pantry right now. Things that together cost you about a single dollar. You need a little hot water, some plain baking soda, and a splash of white vinegar. But more than that, you need a little understanding of what is actually happening down in the dark of that pipe. I am Elias. My family has farmed and kept up this Lancaster County ground for generations. Out here on a farm, you learn early on to fix your own troubles. There is no calling a man out from town every time a gate sags, a tool blunts, or a pipe stops running. You fix it yourself, or it stays broke. Let me tell you where I got the habit of looking at a problem this way, because it is the whole spirit of what we are doing today. When I was just a boy, a pipe under our kitchen sink clogged solid on a bitter winter evening. The water backed up gray and cold, smelling of old dish soap. I looked at my father with wide eyes and asked him if he was going to send for someone to fix it. He stopped what he was doing and looked down at me. He had a look on his face like I had just asked him to send a letter to the president. "Son," he said, "there is no one to send for. And if there were, why would I pay a stranger to do a thing I have 2 hands and a head to do myself?" He got down on the floor on an old burlap sack, lit a small oil lamp, and showed me exactly what I am about to show you. We had that water running clear and sweet before we went to bed that night. I never forgot that lesson, and it was a whole lot bigger than a kitchen drain. It taught me that a person who can fix their own troubles is a free person, beholden to no one. But a person who must call and pay for every little hiccup in their house is forever at the mercy of other people's time and other people's prices. When I show you this today, understand I am not just showing you a cheap trick with kitchen powder. I am handing you a little piece of that self-reliance. Let us look at what is actually wrong down there, because once you understand the cause, the remedy makes plain common sense. Your kitchen drain did not stop up all at once. It has been closing up slow for months, maybe even years. Every time a greasy skillet is rinsed, a little bit of fat goes down the drain while it is still warm and liquid. But as soon as it hits that cold pipe under the floor, it chills. It turns into a thick, waxy pale grease that sticks tight to the walls of the pipe. Then the next day, a few crumbs of bread, some coffee grounds, and a bit of soap scum pass by. They get caught in that sticky grease. Layer after layer builds up, narrowing the dark passage like fat narrows a man's arteries, until one day the opening is no bigger than a straw, and the water simply cannot pass. Now, understand this. When most folks see the water rise, the first thing they reach for is the rubber plunger. They push and pull with brute force. It might shift the blockage an inch or two, enough to get the water moving for a day or two. But it does absolutely nothing to remove that heavy coating of hardened grease lining the pipe walls. The true trouble remains, and the pipe closes right back up. To truly clear it, you do not want to push at it with pressure. You want to melt it, break its grip, and wash it away for good. The old people knew this without needing a degree in chemistry. For over a century, households relied on the simple combination of an alkaline powder and a mild acid. Today, modern laboratory testing confirms exactly why their old-world habit works. When that soft, chalky baking soda meets the sharp, sour vinegar, they create an immediate neutralization reaction, releasing carbon dioxide gas. It is not magic, it is a physical turbulence. Those millions of tiny, fizzing bubbles create a scrubbing action deep inside the dark pipe where no brush could ever reach, lifting the softened fat right off the metal or plastic. But I must be honest with you about the limits of this knowledge. I will not sit here and tell you this always works for every single trouble, because that would not be doing right by you. If someone dropped a plastic toy down the drain, or if a solid metal bolt has lodged itself in the trap, this fizzing will do nothing at all. It will not dissolve a rock, and it will not clear a main sewer line that has been crushed deep underground by tree roots. This method is made specifically for the everyday grease, fat, and soap gunk that slows down a kitchen sink. But since that is the cause 90% of the time, this is always where you ought to start. So, let us get to the work itself. The kitchen is quiet, the gray water is sitting still in the basin, and we are ready to begin the first step of the clearing. I have my old tin kettle right here on the stove, and the water inside is just beginning to whistle. The kettle on the stove has reached a full rolling boil now, its sharp whistle filling the quiet kitchen. That sound is where the work begins. But before we lift it from the burner, we must deal with that gray, stagnant pool currently filling your sink. If you pour boiling water directly into a basin that is already full of cold water, you will accomplish nothing. The cold water will simply absorb the heat, cooling it down before it ever reaches the pipe, and you will be left with a fuller, heavier sink. So, take an old cup, a tin can, or a small bowl, and bail that standing water out. Scoop it into a bucket until the drain hole is visible. It is a messy, unglamorous chore, and the water will smell sour and greasy. But self-sufficiency is rarely about clean hands. It is about doing the small, necessary things to prepare the ground. Once the sink is as dry as you can get it, take that pot of boiling water. Hold it steady, and pour it straight down the drain hole, slow and deliberate. Listen closely as you pour. You want that heat to go directly into the throat of the pipe. If your plumbing is modern, thin-walled plastic, or those cheap flexible white hoses with slip joints, remember the caution I gave you before. Let the water cool for just 2 minutes off the stove, so it is very hot but not boiling hard, which protects the seals while still doing the work. As that hot water hits the drain, you might smell the first heavy scent of old grease lifting into the room. That is the heat doing its first job, softening the outer edges of that waxy white fat, turning it from a solid crust into a soft melting sludge. If the clog is fresh and light, you might even hear a sudden, hollow thump as the weight of the hot water pushes the first layer through. But for a stubborn old blockage, the water will just sit there again, draining a fraction of an inch at a time. That is fine. We have prepared the grease. Now we introduce the reaction. Step out to the pantry and measure out exactly 1 cup of plain dry baking soda. Do not guess the amount. Look at the powder in your hand. It should be stark white, completely dry, and soft as talc between your fingers. If it has clumped into hard little rocks from the humidity in the kitchen, press them flat with the back of a spoon until it is a fine, even powder again. Pour this dry baking soda straight down the drain. Because the pipe is still damp and warm from the hot water, some of the powder will want to stick around the stainless steel rim or sit in a dry mound right at the opening. Take a wooden spoon, a small stick, or even your finger, and gently nudge it down through the grate until every grain has disappeared into the dark. Now you must practice the hardest part of the old ways. You must wait, take a watch, or look at the clock on the wall and give it a full 10 minutes. Do not rush this. Beginner folks always want to hurry the process, pouring the next thing in right away, because they want to see the show. But right now, that dry, alkaline powder is settling into the wet, softened grease down under the floor. It is drawing out the sour odors and beginning to chemically cut into the fatty acids. It needs that quiet time to embed itself into the gunk. While you wait, measure out your cup of plain white vinegar. It should be clear as well water, with that sharp, clean smell that makes your nose twitch if you lean too close. When those 10 minutes are up, pour the vinegar down the hole all at once. Immediately, you need to be ready. The very second the clear liquid meets that white powder, a deep, guttering hiss will rise up out of the pipe. It sounds like a small beast waking up down there. White, thick foam will come boiling up out of the drain hole, thick and frothy like the head on a fresh pail of milk. This is the moment where another common mistake happens. People stand back and just watch the foam spill out into the empty sink. Understand this: if the foam is rising up into the open air of your basin, it is not doing its work down where the trouble is. You must direct that force downward. The moment you pour the vinegar, take a flat sink stopper, an old saucer, or a thick, damp rag and press it firmly over the drain hole. Hold it down with your hand. By sealing the top, you force that expanding carbon dioxide gas to push downward, driving those millions of microscopic, fizzing bubbles deep into the compacted grease and food scraps. Hold it there for 5 minutes while the pipe hisses and vibrates beneath your palm. You can feel the small, thrumming life of the reaction through the rag. That foam is physically wedging itself between the pipe wall and the grease crust, lifting the gunk away in tiny, loosened flakes. After 5 minutes, the hissing will begin to quiet down into a faint, watery murmur. Lift the rag away. The foam will have subsided, leaving a clean, vinegar-scented moisture around the drain. Now, we must deliver the final stroke. While the reaction was working, you should have put a second kettle of water on to boil. Lift it now, fully boiling and aggressive. Pour it straight down the throat of the pipe as fast as the opening can take it without overflowing. This is the flush. The grease is melted. The baking soda and vinegar have broken its grip and lifted it loose. And this heavy, fast rush of boiling water carries the whole shattered mass down into the main line and out of your house for good. Listen to the sound it makes. If you hear a sudden, deep, hollow gulp, a clear whoosh of air following the water, you have won the day. The pipe is open, and the air is moving free behind the water. To be absolutely certain, turn on your kitchen faucet to the hottest setting it has. Let it run full blast for 3 or 4 minutes. Do not turn it off the moment the water disappears. You want a long, continuous current to sweep away any half-loosened chunks that might be lingering further down the line, ensuring they do not settle and harden again the moment the pipe cools. Watch the water swirl around the drain, disappearing instantly without a single hesitation. But what if you do all of this, and that gray water still creeps up the stainless steel, stubborn as a mule? If that water still rises after the first flush, do not lose heart, and do not let your hand stray toward the telephone to call the man out just yet. Stop and think. A stubborn trouble often requires a stubborn remedy. If a pipe has been narrowing for 5 or 10 years, one single flash of foam might only clear a path through the very center of the gunk, leaving the thick walls of the blockage intact. If you find the sink is still slow, you simply run the whole business a second time, exactly as we just did. Often, that second round is the one that completely breaks the back of the clog, because the first round did the hard work of softening and cracking the shell. Now, let us sit down for a minute while the pipe rests, and let me explain the plain science of what is actually happening inside that dark steel or plastic. I do not have a piece of paper from a university hanging on my wall. But the laws of nature work the same on a farm as they do in a laboratory. It is no accident that these two things from the pantry do the work of a $20 jug of store poison. Think of that hardened grease inside your pipe like old cold lard in a baking pan. If you try to scrub cold lard with plain water, your brush just slides right over it. It is stubborn. But when we use baking soda, we are using what science calls a base or an alkaline substance. Baking soda has a high pH, which means it is the chemical opposite of an acid. On its own, a base has a natural ability to break down fatty acids. It changes the structure of the grease, making it slick and loose, almost turning a bit of it into a crude sort of soap that water can dissolve. Then we add the vinegar. Vinegar is a mild acetic acid. Now, when you bring a strong base and a strong acid together, they do not like each other. They want to find a balance, a middle ground, and they fight to get there. That fight is what you see and hear as that violent white foam. In the language of science, the acid and the base are converting into water and carbon dioxide gas, because that gas is trapped inside the narrow walls of your pipe, especially if you are holding that damp rag firm over the drain hole. It expands with great force. Think of it like 100,000 tiny, microscopic shovels all working at the exact same second. Those little bubbles force their way underneath the softened grease, prying it away from the smooth wall of the pipe. Brute force from a plunger just shoves the whole mass forward like a plug, but this chemical reaction dissolves the glue, holding the plug to the metal. It is elegant, it is gentle on the house, and it is entirely predictable. But as a master practitioner, I owe you the whole truth about this method. I will not give you a fairy tale and tell you this will cure every sick pipe in the country. Every tool has its purpose, and every method has its strict boundaries. You must know exactly where this works and where it fails, so you do not waste your time or your hope. First, let us talk about the materials under your sink. If your house was built in the old days, you likely have heavy iron pipes, copper, or thick galvanized steel. This baking soda and vinegar method is entirely safe for them. In fact, it is far safer than those harsh store-bought chemical drain openers. Those heavy store liquids contain caustic soda or sulfuric acid. They generate an intense, unnatural chemical heat that can actually warp modern plastic pipes, dissolve the glue in your joints, or eat away at old rusted iron until it becomes thin as paper and leaks under your floor. The pantry method gives you a gentle, natural reaction that cleans the pipe without chewing into the material itself. However, if your home has very old, brittle lead pipes, which you still find sometimes in houses built before the grandfathers of our grandfathers were born, you must be careful with the boiling water. Lead is a soft, weak metal that expands quickly when heated. Pouring boiling water straight down a cold lead pipe can cause it to buckle or split at a weak seam. For lead, or for those very cheap, thin plastic slip joints that twist together by hand, use water that is just hot to the hand, not rolling from the stove. The reaction will still happen, but you will not stress the joints. Now, let us look at the nature of the clog itself, because this is the truest limit of the old way. This dollar method is a king when it comes to organic matter. It excels at breaking down animal fats, vegetable oils, soap scum, and the soft, slimy gunk that grows in the dark of a drain. But understand this, it will not dissolve hair. Hair is made of a tough protein that a mild acid and base cannot touch. If your kitchen drain is slow because someone has been washing a long-haired dog in the sink, or if the bathroom sink is clogged with years of morning shaving, this foam will simply wash right through the strands without breaking them. It will also do nothing for solid objects. If a small metal bottle cap, a plastic vegetable tag, or a heavy accumulation of sand from washing garden greens has settled into the U-shaped trap beneath your sink, the vinegar will bubble right past it and leave it sitting there. For a solid blockage like that, or for hair, you need mechanical force, not a chemical reaction. You need to reach for a drain snake, that long, flexible steel wire you crank by hand, or you must take a wrench and physically remove the little curved pipe beneath the sink to empty it out into a bucket. Lastly, you must consider distance. This method works best when the trouble is close to the sink, within the first few feet of the drain, or right inside the trap. If the clog is 50 feet away, deep down where your main sewer line leaves the foundation of the house and runs toward the road, the baking soda and vinegar will be spent and diluted by the standing water in the line, long before it ever reaches the trouble. If you run this treatment twice, and the water does not budge a single inch, you are likely dealing with a deep systemic stoppage, or perhaps tree roots that have cracked the pipe outdoors to drink the water. For that, you truly do need the specialist and his heavy power cables. But do not let those limitations discourage you. In a kitchen, 90 times out of 100, the enemy is simply old cooking grease and food gunk that has gone cold in the trap. And for that everyday trouble, this old remedy is an absolute certainty. It treats the true cause of the sickness, not just the symptom, but clearing the drain is only the first half of the battle. The real wisdom of the old people was not just knowing how to mend a broken thing. It was knowing how to live in a way that kept it from ever breaking in the first place. A man who spends his life clearing the same clog every 3 months is not a free man. He is just a busy one. So, we must look at the small daily habits that ensure that gray water never rises toward your rim again. As we stand here by the clean, empty basin, watching the last droplets of water slip away down the drain without a moment's hesitation, it is worth looking back at where this knowledge comes from. This simple trick of bringing a white powder and a clear acid together is not something thought up by internet writers or modern television hosts. It is a piece of living history, a quiet legacy carried through generations of ordinary people who had to rely on the materials at hand. If you look back into the old household manuals from the 19th century, books like The American Frugal Housewife, written by Lydia Maria Child back in the 1830s, you will find the earliest roots of this wisdom. In those days, long before modern indoor plumbing became common, people used heavy wooden or iron sinks that emptied into small drainage trenches or dry wells outside the kitchen wall. They did not have access to manufactured chemical complexes. If a drain slowed down with grease from the evening lard or mutton fat, a housewife could not call an expert out from town. She went to her pantry. They used what they called saleratus, which was the early ancestor of our modern baking soda, and they followed it with homemade cider vinegar fermented right in the cellar. They knew by plain observation and the passing down of mother's wisdom that the violent fizzing of these two everyday items would scour the grease away. Throughout the hard years of the Great Depression and across the vast stretches of Lancaster County where my own people farmed, this was simply how a house was kept. It was a matter of thrift, necessity, and a stubborn refusal to spend a single penny on a trouble that could be settled with common sense. You do not have to take only the word of old farmers and dusty 19th century books for this either. Modern science has looked back at these old ways and found them entirely sound. If you look at the agricultural extension bulletins published by universities throughout the mid-20th century, such as the home maintenance guides sent out to rural families by the Penn State Extension Service, you will find this exact method laid out in black and white. Engineers and home economists studied the reaction under controlled conditions. They confirmed that the chemical byproduct of the mixture, sodium acetate and carbon dioxide gas, creates an effervescent agitation that breaks the surface tension of hardened fats. Government housing bulletins from the post-war era regularly recommended this pantry treatment as a safe, non-toxic alternative to protect public septic systems from being killed by industrial lye and commercial poisons. The science merely gave a name to what the old people already knew by heart. Nature provides its own solutions if you know how to ask, stop, and think about that. We live in an age that tries very hard to make us believe that every small human problem requires a complicated expensive, industrial answer. We are told we need a specific bottle for this, a licensed expert for that, and a warning label for everything. It is a system that grows rich on our forgetting. It thrives when we look at our own two hands and think them helpless. But it does not have to be that way. The next time you stand in your kitchen and see that gray pool of water beginning to rise, do not reach for your telephone, and do not head down to the store to buy a jug of warning labels. Put your boots on, walk over to your stove, and light the flame under the kettle. Take that small box of baking soda and that bottle of vinegar from the shelf. Understand that when you do this, you are doing more than just clearing a pipe for $1. You are taking a small, quiet stand for your own independence. You are deciding that your home is a place maintained by the intelligence and the labor of the people who live within its walls, not by a string of strangers charging strangers' prices. It is a simple thing, a humble thing. A cup of powder, a cup of acid, and a pot of hot water. But within those simple things lies the very core of a self-reliant life. It is the quiet dignity of knowing that you can look at a trouble, understand its nature, and mend it yourself before the sun goes down. Try it for yourself the next time the water slows. Learn the rhythm of the boiling water, the weight and the rush of the foam. Teach it to your children just as my father taught it to me by the light of that old lamp under the sink. Keep that $1 in your pocket, keep that worry out of your mind, and let the old, plain knowledge keep your house running clear and free, just as it has for 100 years before us, and just as it will for 100 years to come. The house that is kept up by the hands that live in it is a house that stands strong. Go on now, look to your own drains, and see how simple the truth of it really is.